Thank you. So this work is based on the dissertation work of my student, Yiran Wang. And Yiran got a job at Google, and unfortunately, she was not able to get travel documents to travel here to present the talk. So I will do my best to present it. So Facebook is widely adopted among college students, and it really has a lot of important functions. These have been well studied. So, for example, Facebook can afford a quick break from study, can offer short-term stress relief, connect to other students and family. It can also be a platform for teaching and learning, and it can supplement classroom learning. Now, for quite a long time, researchers have been concerned that the use of Facebook can be detrimental to academic performance. And the studies, for the most part, show a negative relationship between Facebook use and academic performance. More time on Facebook, the worse is your GPA, grade point average. But there are inconsistent results, and most of these are due to methodological limitations, and I'll talk about that shortly. So the conventional view is that Facebook is the big detractor. It detracts students from studying. And so this kind of research has mainly looked at self-reported time that people spend on Facebook, self-reported multitasking. And we know from research that people are notoriously bad at estimating the amount of time that they spend on technology. Other research has looked at the frequency of Facebook use, and there are generally biases in these kinds of self-reports. And there is some work that has done logging of Facebook use, but they didn't take context in which Facebook was used into account. Now, an alternative view is that, well, wait a minute, let's look at the conditions that people are in before they enter Facebook, because this could be informative. So maybe people are already distracted before they go into Facebook. So maybe Facebook is not the thing that distracts people. And there is some prior research that shows that it's a person's attentional state that makes them susceptible to distractions. For example, if a person is bored, it makes them more susceptible to doing things like Facebook. So the goal of this research is basically to ask the question, how does Facebook use relate to academic performance? And so this is quite a comprehensive view into it, not just looking at duration of Facebook use, but also looking at things like the frequency of checking Facebook, as well as duration of time on Facebook, but also looking at context in which Facebook is being used. And so this is the second research goal, is to investigate the context in which Facebook is used. That is, what were the activities that people did right before going into Facebook? What was their attentional state before using Facebook? And how might that impact grade point average? So these are the methods. This was a week-long study with 50 college students. There were 21 males and 29 females. The participants were distributed fairly equally among grade levels from freshman through senior. Ages 18 through 25, median age was 20, both STEM and non-STEM majors. These were regular Facebook users, which pretty much meant, everybody who volunteered to participate turned out to be a regular Facebook user. Data collection had actually three components. There was automatic logging, talk about that shortly. There was experience sampling, and then after the study was a post-study survey. So a browser extension called Rose was used for data collection. And so Rose automatically records usage statistics about Facebook, such as when Facebook is open, so timestamps when people go into Facebook, collects user activities. For example, did the user make a comment? Did they like something? It measures page scrolling in terms of pixels, and this is called we label this browsing, and it administers experience sampling surveys. No content information is collected, just metadata about the Facebook use. So participants came into a laboratory, the procedure was explained, Rose was installed on their personal laptops. So once the browser extension is installed, here's what happens. So a student opens a Facebook page, and this is in the course of the course of the student's regular college life, right, over the course of a week. So they go into Facebook, and a pre-Facebook survey will slide over on the left side of the screen automatically, and then participants were instructed to fill out these surveys the moment they showed up. This pre-Facebook survey asked participants to self-report the last activity they did right before they came to Facebook. And then they had to rate their attentional state right before coming into Facebook. And so student engagement was the main construct that was being looked at. This is a construct that's measured in the following dimensions: concentration, interest, and enjoyment. And this is used as a proxy for students' self-reported attention. Now, there's a problem of administering surveys, experience sampling every time someone goes into Facebook. So to not burden the user too much, there was a time gap of 30 minutes that was instituted, so no survey could be given within a window of time of 30 minutes. And on average, about 3 to 4 of these pre-Facebook surveys were collected per participant per day. Now, there's a challenge in analyzing the data because people go into Facebook and they'll see an interesting link to, say, YouTube, click on the YouTube, watch it, and then come right back into Facebook. And so it turns out if you look at the data, there's a lot of gaps. You'll see Facebook use, then there's a gap of something else, and then Facebook use again. And we don't know what happens in that gap. So the data was analyzed looking at the distribution of gap times. Sometimes they were just a few seconds, sometimes they were much longer. The median length of time between these two Facebook uses was 40 seconds. And so an analysis was done with gaps of many different lengths of time, and basically the results were consistent. And so 40 seconds was used as a measure. Anything less than 40 seconds, two different Facebook uses were fused and called a single session. So this is an overview of the metrics that were collected for each Facebook session. So pre-Facebook activity, so what people did prior to Facebook, and this was divided into two categories: schoolwork, whether it was offline or online, and what we call leisure, which is basically everything other than schoolwork. We use leisure as a label. There were a few participants who worked, but by and large, most participants did not work. So leisure it's a fair description of this kind of non-schoolwork activity, again, divided into online and offline. And then pre-Facebook attention, like I mentioned, was measured in terms of 3 dimensions: concentration, interest, and enjoyment. And what was yielded from a single Facebook use session was the duration in sessions, browsing measured in terms of pixels, and social interactions measured in terms of number of comments, likes, and posts. And then this is looking at it from the granularity of a weekly summary, and these are the different metrics that were gleaned. Okay, let's talk about results. So first of all, 2/3 of activities immediately preceding Facebook use were non-work activities, either on the computer or offline. Schoolwork on the computer only occurred about a quarter of the time before going into Facebook, and schoolwork offline was the least common. So for the rest of the analysis, just two basic categories of pre-Facebook activity will be used: leisure and schoolwork. So looking at the frequency of checking Facebook, the distribution was divided into the top third and the bottom third in terms of frequency of checking Facebook. You can see here that people who checked, who we call high checkers, who checked more frequently, they spent longer time on Facebook over the course of the week, which we would expect. But their average duration per session was less, almost half. And the average number of social interactions per session was higher when people checked less frequently. So just to summarize here, there were no significant differences in gender, year of school, or GPA. High checkers spent about 3 times more total time on Facebook in a week, less time, less social interaction per session, and higher interest levels in the activity that they did before Facebook. Now, the data can be sliced and diced and looked at in a different way, and we can look at comparing high and low students in terms of their GPAs, grade point averages. So students were divided. We took the top third and the bottom third and looked at the following variables of Facebook use: average duration after a leisure activity, average number of social interactions. These were significant. So just to summarize here, high GPA students spent less time on Facebook per session. High GPA students spent nearly half the time in Facebook compared to low GPA students when Facebook followed a leisure activity. And I'm going to try to interpret that in a little bit. This analysis looks at how what people did prior to going into Facebook affects their duration for each session. And here it turns out 2 things. Students spent longer time on Facebook for each session if the Facebook session followed a leisure activity. That means a non-schoolwork activity, and lower interest in the leisure activity before going into Facebook was related to a longer time spent on Facebook. Okay? So, frequent and infrequent Facebook checkers didn't differ in GPA. However, high and low GPA differed in the duration of Facebook use session. Students spent longer time on Facebook if the Facebook session followed a leisure activity. And if the student's interest in the leisure activity was low, they were bored in it, then they were more likely to spend more time on Facebook. So why did the GPA of frequent Facebook checkers not suffer, right? You would expect they would. Well, having a high degree of Facebook use doesn't mean that people check Facebook more while they're studying. That's the key difference. Given that frequent checkers have a higher interest level prior to Facebook, prior to going into Facebook, and given that they spend shorter amount of time on Facebook, here's a hypothesis. Facebook may not solve the curiosity needs of people who are frequent Facebook checkers. Now, if we look at the context leading up to Facebook use, a higher degree of overall Facebook use doesn't necessarily influence academic performance. What the key takeaway here is how a student uses Facebook does. So when when Facebook use follows leisure activities, students showed longer use. This is potentially problematic, as longer per session duration is related to lower GPA. So the message here is that prolonged and potentially problematic Facebook use is likely to occur when students might be in a kind of lethargic or play mode. The results differ from these past studies because of the past studies use different methodologies. They use self-reports. Here, this is using logging. And of course, these past studies didn't look at context, what people did prior to coming into Facebook. So I'd like to give thanks to the developers of Rose, participants, and please, for further questions, please contact Yiran Wang, but I'm happy to take questions also.
Thank you. Please, for asking questions, state your name and affiliation.
Sure. Hello, Jeremy Warner, UC Berkeley. This is really interesting work. Thank you for presenting it. I was curious if it was just too difficult to find students that didn't use Facebook as sort of a control, or is it just not an interesting comparison for this study?
Yeah, it was more the latter. It was not interesting, right? And there actually are very few people that don't use Facebook, so they're anomalous, right? And they might differ along other dimensions too. So this is the modal, college student, people who use Facebook quite regularly. Thank you.
Amal Nanavati, Carnegie Mellon University. So I'm an undergrad myself, and there are many times when I'm supposed to be studying, and then I am getting distracted, and I go onto Facebook. And at that time, if my friends call me out on it or point out that I'm getting distracted, I will not go on Facebook. And it seems like if right before going onto Facebook, a pre-survey pops up, that would serve as the same reminder of, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on how the fact that a survey popped up might have skewed the results you were getting.
There is always the possibility that methodology is influencing results, and we absolutely cannot rule out that a pre-survey is going to bias people one way or the other. You're right. We didn't have a control, so we really can't say. The way I look at it is, because I do a lot of other kinds of logging studies, is that maybe initially people are affected, but very quickly people just fall back into their natural habits, and they do what they're used to, because habits are really hard to break. So it is possible that it might have changed people, but I would bet maybe just initially.
Hi, Lee Tabor, UC Santa Cruz. I thought this was a really great methodology, and I had a question about how these results might speak to habitual procrastination, because I thought it was really interesting that leisure or doing it during people didn't differ on doing it during studying. I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little.
If I'm not quite sure I followed the question.
Oh, just. I guess more in general, how do these results speak to the idea of procrastination using social media?
So how it might extend beyond Facebook. It sounds. I think that the takeaway here is that if people are bored in something that they're doing, then social media provides something else that could fill these attentional needs. And, maybe we would find the same results if we looked at other social media besides Facebook. But there's certainly the possibility that social media can add and prolong this kind of procrastination, especially if people are in this kind of lethargic mode to begin with, right? If people are already alert, they might have more mental resources to self-regulate, right? And they won't procrastinate so much and spend so much time on social media.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. This concludes our session.